had the rehearsal introduction. So once more, welcome everyone to the 14th edition of the At Home with 19th Century Dress and Textiles Reframed Research Network. And thank you for joining us in the ether, wherever you are, morning, noon, night, for this very exciting special edition, a panel discussion with our guests, Cheyney McKnight, Bernadette Banner, and Abby Cox. These three experts have provided such an enticing draw that we thought it was prudent to do this event via webinar, which is probably very different for our usual attendees, who are usually just a bunch of heads on Zoom, but we thought hundreds and hundreds of heads on Zoom might be a little overwhelming. So sadly, we won't be able to see all of you on video this time, which we do miss because often you're knitting or crocheting or embroidering or doing something interesting. So please do, as usual though, use the chat to tell you where you're from. We've already had that going on. We have people in the middle of the night in Australia. We have people who are finally able to make it from California and everywhere in between. So it's been great. We are leaving the event open during the discussion. What did I just say? We're leaving the discussion open during the event. The chat will be open during the event is what I'm trying to say. Also, because we want to try to keep that community atmosphere that we usually have during these events. And before we begin, just a little bit of housekeeping. So we've scheduled this event for an hour and a half today. Our discussion will run for about 50 minutes. And so that should leave plenty of time afterwards to answer your questions and have further discussion. Please go ahead and use the Q&A button though for questions during the event. And we've set this section up so everyone will be able to see the questions, and there's this really neat thing where you can apparently like to upvote a question. So if you might already see your question asked, you don't have to answer it again, you can just click. And our chat hosts and question masters will be looking at that, and we're going to try to get through everybody's questions anyway, but that'll give us a sense of the ones you really, really want to see answered. Again, we welcome you to use the chat to engage with each other and leave comments. But with the guests that we have today, we're very, very confident that this will be a civilized audience and that all the chat will be respectful. But we also do have a co-host team on hand to monitor the chat and remove any disruptions if we have any. So don't be disruptive, please. You can message any of the hosts if you need any assistance, and our team will try to help you as best as we can. And today, from the 19th Century Dress and Textiles Reframed Committee, I'd like to introduce Veronica Isaac and Suzanne Rowland. Veronica and Suzanne, you want to wave? Are you there? I can't see. See, you're under my script. There you are. Right. Oh, I've just done something. There we go. Oh, what have I done?
I'm still here, I promise, Robin.
I know. Okay. I'm trusting you. You're gonna do. Yeah. Okay. So you've waved. Veronica and Suzanne are here, who are helping to run the meeting and technical stuff, and they're going to be looking at helping out in the chat if needed. And then we've got Anna Von Kett, Lynn Hulse, and Kate Strasden, and they're going to be chairing our questions panel at the end. And I'm Robin Calvert, and I have the great privilege of chairing today's conversation. So with that, I'm going to request that our co-hosts turn off their video so we can focus on the speakers and me, unfortunately. The speakers are much lovelier. So, right. So I am pretty confident that our attendees know who the guests are today, but you might not know much about our network and our at-home talk. So I'm going to just really briefly introduce you to this group. And I also want to welcome you to get involved with us too. So the mission of the 19th Century Dress and Textiles Reframed Network is to facilitate and promote new approaches to the study of dress and textiles in the long 19th century, which we defined as being about 1790 to 1914. Did I say 17? Yeah, 1790 to 1914. I need more coffee. 19th century dress and textiles are well represented in museum collections and in the history of fashion. However, far less academic research has been completed on the subject that might be expected. Moreover, popular culture representations have facilitated the creation of problematic myths around the period's clothing and textiles. And I know all of our speakers today are do some fun myth busting in their work too. In Reframing, we seek to widen our subjects outwards by embracing the voices and experiences of scholars and makers from across genders, nationalities, and disciplines. We seek to stimulate dialogue and collaboration to bridge gaps between dress and textiles. 19th Century Dress and Textiles Reframed will confront and challenge myths and assumptions by producing and disseminating new research, complex histories in the field to a broader audience. And we think our guests today represent that remit very, very well and are doing this in very exciting ways. Each of them have come to their research in various ways, different avenues, and have found platforms for dissemination of their work via social media. Amongst other things, I think, too. They're independent scholars for the 21st century, and we've asked them to join us today to learn a bit more about their excellent projects, but also to help us, all the rest of us, think about how we can better expand our work outside the traditional ivory towers of universities and museums, as much as we might all love them most of the time. I'm just very aware that we've been striking here again in the UK. So rather than listening to me, though, I'm going to hand over the virtual mic to each of them for just a couple of minutes to talk briefly about their backgrounds. I could go on. I usually do like to give kind introductions because I think that's the polite thing to do, having been brought up in the South. But actually, I think that you guys are much better placed. So if you would, talk to us, take a couple minutes, each of you guys, to talk to us a little bit about yourselves and your backgrounds and kind of how you got to what you do. I was going to call on Cheyney first, but do you feel prepared to be first up? Cool. Okay, Cheyney, take it away.
Hello. So I got started, I was fresh out of college, maybe a year out of college, and I had gotten into a law school, and I learned pretty quickly in working in a law firm. I did not want to become a lawyer, but I was kind of like, this is the path I started, so I'm going to continue. But I was flipping through Facebook one day, and my middle school classmate was on Facebook, and he was dressed as someone from the 19th century, and he's Black. And so I was like, have you been kidnapped? Do you need help? Blink twice. He had not been kidnapped. He said, I'm a living historian, and this is my job. This is what I enjoy doing. I also do it as a hobby. And I was like, interesting. Maybe I'll try it out. And he said, there's a reenactment in a month. I don't think you'll be ready for it. And I was like, don't tell me what I'll be ready for. I will be ready for this. So I'd never sewn anything in my life, and I made 3 shifts or chemise undergarments in a month, along with pantalettes in 1 month by hand. They were awful. Don't get it twisted. They were awful. And so my first reenactment was 150th Gettysburg. I really found that we were able to start a conversation with people for visually. It really drummed up conversation about the interaction between enslaved and free Black people and the Confederacy and the Union. And there were parents that came up to me and said that because of us, they had to talk to their children about the role slavery played in the country, as well as race relations in the 19th century. And so I was like, this can start conversations and mend fences. And fast forward, I joined a large living history museum, and I became a historical interpreter. I left a large history museum, and then I started my own business. And I really want to help museums tell these stories appropriately, as well as support Black interpreters in telling these stories. And also having a conversation about costuming and museums, when appropriate, when not appropriate.
Thank you so much. And we are coming back to some of those questions and topics too, to talk more about them. They're really, really good and exciting. Bernadette,
Hi, I'm Bernadette Banner. Um, I began actually working in theater. I was an assistant costumer on Broadway, and then I did life backwards a bit, went to university in the middle of that, thinking I'll just get a degree real quick because that's the thing to do. But while I was at university, I discovered that there's this whole world of dress history. This is a whole field of study. I was always picking the Shakespeare shows and the shows that involved research and spending all my time researching and not enough time actually designing the show. So one of my professors noticed this and said, there's this thing called the School of Historical Dress in London. And they weren't running courses at the time, but the principal of the School of Historical Dress, Jenny Chermani, very, very kindly offered to let me come and help on the publication that they were working on, which happened to be the continuation of Janet Arnold's Patterns of Fashion series. So I had the wonderful opportunity to spend 3 weeks there in the summer of 2017. I didn't leave though. I stayed for about 3 months, came back, graduated, came back to London and continued working. Have been a bit back and forth the last couple of years. I got very excited about reconstruction work. That was the work that I was doing for the school, and just decided to do some reconstruction work on my own. And Instagram pictures was not doing it justice. I also have a bit of a background in filmmaking. It's what I did before Broadway. And I thought this is the medium that I feel that I can tell stories the best in, the filmmaking. So I started making little videos and I put them on YouTube thinking, this is just for me, just to document what I'm doing and because I find it enjoyable. And then it became a thing and now it's my job.
I just realized I muted myself, and that's the dream is what I said. Abby, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Abby. I have been studying dress history since I was an undergrad at Indiana University. And so that's back in the aughts. I got my undergrad in history of art, history, as well as theater and drama with a dual focus in acting and costume design. I met Robin when I was doing my master's at University of Glasgow, Scotland, where I got a degree in decorative arts and design history because the dress history program hadn't started yet, unfortunately. From there, I also worked at a very large living history museum with someone else on this panel, where I actually was able to, I did a few jobs at Colonial Williamsburg, but one of the most the biggest one was working as the apprentice milliner mantua maker in the historic trades department, where I was able to focus on reconstructing and studying 18th century women's clothing with a focus in the last quarter of the 18th century. And then I rabbit holed and niched down even further into hairdressing and hair care, because that was like a super fun rabbit hole that I found myself down. From there, I went and worked at American Duchess for a little over 5 years, where I co-authored 2 books, 18th century dressmaking, as well as 18th century beauty, and helped grow that company. Where I think everyone knows American Duchess, but in case you don't, it's a historical reproduction shoe company. And then in spring of 2020, I had a video go viral and some other things happened, and now I do YouTube full time. Where I take my long history of dress history and basically use it as a medium to tell stories through video essays, reconstruction work as well, obviously, because that was kind of my first love, but also just kind of having a good time and finding the humor in history because they were weird. They were weird people. So I have a good time with it.
All 3 of you, you didn't set out to go, what, actually, I think I'm going to go make a career on YouTube. Look at all these other people doing that. I think it's sort of like found you in a lot of ways. And that moment of, oh my God, that went viral. How did that feel? This popped into my head. I know, Abby, you've done a whole video about what it was like to go viral. Is it just...
Yeah. I think my experience, unfortunately, it's not unique, but it is also unique, at least within this circle of women. But talking to Bernadette when it happened to me, because she was the sage wizened pro at this, where I was having my like imposter syndrome and just these fears of waking up in the middle of the night, and you see like you null out to no subscribers and no video views, and like everything you think that's happening will be just gone overnight, to then like when Cheyney had that experience, like I was like, here's what's gonna happen, like this is how the process works. Like going viral is very strange, especially when it's your first time, because you feel very naked and exposed, but then you're also really excited because you know that you're literally watching your life change in real time.
I'm wondering, I've got, I have these questions, and I know we're going to bounce around between a few things. And I was very privileged to do a video with Abby. And for me, it was just like weird that there were like hundreds of thousands of people who were seeing talk about my PhD. And I was, so one of the things I wanted to talk to you guys about a bit is the connect or disconnect between what you do in academia. And you've just said imposter syndrome, and in some of our chats individually, we've talked about this, and I've reassured you that we all have it, and that my PhD supervisor, Margaret McDonald, who's this whistler, I've seen her be like, was that speech okay? That it's one of these things that we grapple with. And I think particularly women grapple with too. So let's talk about that a little bit. Actually, maybe Bernadette, I'll throw this to you to kick us off a little bit, because we talked about that a little bit, about that kind of, where do you see yourself sitting within sort of academia? And do you feel like what you do is accepted, or do you feel like it, just all these kinds of?
Oh, it's a tough journey, that one. That's a loaded question.
It's a loaded question, but also you're here because we do. Let me just, spoiler alert, we think what you do is good academic research. That's why we've asked you. So it's not a how dare you kind of question at all. But I actually, out of concern, I think about you guys, like, I hope you realize that what you do is great research. So how does that fit with you?
We were just talking the other day about this, and I was saying to you how I sort of got my toe into academia a little bit in the beginning, and YouTube happened completely unexpectedly. No one really knows what YouTube is. It wasn't really a thing that anyone was doing. It wasn't legitimized. And I remember, I said to you, I remember thinking like, well, that there goes my academic career. Like I'm completely legitimate now. I'm a name on the internet. Like that is it. I'll just do this thing now. So it's been kind of a reassuring and a wonderful journey the last couple of years to watch YouTube sort of grow. And because admittedly what I was doing in the beginning wasn't really, I would say, academic work. It was just me sort of having fun on camera, but it has grown into a thing where we now do video essays, and we put our footnotes in the description, and we link our sources, and we do try and put out work that is as thoroughly researched as we can possibly make it, to appeal to a wide audience of people who might not have even heard of dress history. And it's only been in the last few years that I've realized that, oh, hang on, there is a benefit to that. There is a whole other set of skills in marketing, in production, in appealing to people who don't necessarily know as much about dress history, that can be beneficial to dress history as a field. Marketing and distribution, like we can combine skills, and we can make this field even bigger. So it's been an ultimately reassuring journey, but it's been a weird one.
Yeah. And Cheyney, you work in the museum field still. You do have a job at New York Historical Society, right? And so how does that work with your job? They're like, yay, this is great, or how do they accept what you do, and how does that work?
Yeah. What I do for Not Your Mama's History is actually directly linked to my job at New York Historical Society, because I'm the manager of living history. Yes, one of the only Black women who has a living history at a major institution in this country. I have to tell myself that once every so often, because the imposter syndrome is real. So it's very interesting because I see myself as an ambassador for living history at New York Historical Society. And I also kind of use it as a place where we can experiment because this is not a living history museum, I'm able to look at living history in different ways and make it what we want to make it. But I also see people can be very dismissive of historical interpretation, frontline staff, as well as living history costume interpretation. So I really make it my job to say, hey, guess what? This is hand in hand. I make sure that your research gets to the public at large. So I work regularly with historians and archaeologists. There have been videos where I have been at a dig site as they are bringing things up with my camera of a slave dwelling. And this is really connecting directly with the public. And then also, they sometimes need us to show them what certain things were used for. There have been times where I have had an archaeologist say, "What is this?" I'm like, "Oh, honey child, that is."
You've been doing some very interesting videos. We should come back to lately with the Recording Museum of Glass Objects, which I've just been like, what? How are you getting these? So I'll drop that there and we can come back to that a little bit. But I love what you just said, because what you guys are doing are bridging a gap between experimental archaeology is a very valid, line of inquiry, and something that many of us in dress history are trying to get on. I mean, Hillary Davidson, who couldn't be here today because she's asleep in Australia, this is a massive cornerstone of her research. And you guys are doing this, but actually, I think people in that field have been doing that for so long. When I was, a decade ago, when I was writing my PhD, and I have only learned to sew in the last year, as you guys, I've told you guys, I was trying to understand things about sleeves and corsets and everything. And the first people I thought to ask were my old pals from the Society of Creative Anachronism, quite frankly, because they had been doing reenactment for so long and they'd actually, worn these things. So I love that there is sort of I think a gap that we're slowly trying to close. Abby, you, as you mentioned, you and I did the same MLit, which is slightly behind me. And so you did go through that academic road, and I did the foolish thing of writing a PhD, and you did the smart thing of going to work. So for you, I mean, how if you want to just briefly talk to that question too, how's that?
About imposter syndrome? Because I was getting really wrapped up in everyone's story.
And all, okay. Yeah, and how do you feel like you're still part of that world? And yeah,
I think so. I honestly, in a lot of ways, I feel like going back to YouTube and kind of flexing that muscle has put me kind of more back in the good graces of academia in a lot of ways compared to when I worked at American Duchess. Simply because when my channel started to really take off, I was doing things with antique clothing, and I was sharing antique garments, and I was taking down and ripping down that barrier of entry for people to understand what antique garments really looked like. And as far as I'm aware, like, I know, Bernadette, you had done a couple of videos with a couple of things, but like, I hadn't seen a lot of people go, here is a 1860s dress, like, let's literally dive inside of it like a colonoscopy, right? And so from the get-go, I was starting to get, validation and attention, if you will, from academics in various forms of research and doing different research projects who were reaching out to me to speak to me about why I was doing this and my kind of thought process behind everything. So I have been, in that way, YouTube has actually really helped me kind of find my footing as an academic and feel a little bit more confident in myself. And I am actually currently cosplaying as a Big Ten costume professor right now. So like my imposter syndrome is now like kind of in a weird place when it comes to academia, because I am actually guest teaching at the moment at IU for the costume history class.
Also our old alma mater, weirdly.
Yes. So at least with that, I haven't felt the imposter syndrome in the same way. I mean, I know there are people who bash us on the internet, but I got my degree. I'm like, I don't know what to tell you guys. You don't have to like my research. Like, you're not required to like it.
You know, as that said, you all reference your things too. And you're doing, it's just a different format and a more accessible format, quite frankly. And you've kind of bled into what I was going to have for my next question too, is how has doing this expanded your own research? Like how has the act of putting together these videos, has it made you a better researcher? Has it taken you down different avenues? Like what are the kinds of things that we could learn? And I know we also want to talk about like, what is the skill set for doing this? Because I think that probably it's quite frightening for a lot of us who don't have these skill sets or who are more entrenched in the academic system, who might want to dip their toe in, but it just seems overwhelming. So that's kind of a two-part of skill sets, but I'm asking both about that business side and technical side, but also probably maybe more interestingly for a lot of folk here is how has it impacted your research and how you do research? Abby, do you want to talk about that quickly to start off, and we'll go back the other way?
Yeah. It's been great actually. So okay, well, the challenge has been getting access to databases and research archives. I'm not going to say someone in this panel has like done me a big solid with that for a long time. Someone did, so that way I could get my kick and my fix of primary source, because it's hard to do good academic research if you don't have access to databases. Now that my husband works for Indiana University, I have access to all the things, so I'm very excited now. But it's basically made it free range. If I want to research, for example, Merkins and do a video on it, like I can. I don't have to get permission. It doesn't have to be for a class. It can literally just be whatever like floats my boat. Or if I want to have an excuse to do research over medieval clothing because I've never had a reason to, now I can come up with a reason to, so long as it's an interesting video concept, like I can do whatever I want. So I'm not restricted anymore to the last quarter of the 18th century finally, so that's very liberating. And yeah, you can have a good time with it.
That's interesting. And you also don't have to worry about your teaching load, your administrative duties, all of the things that we have to juggle. Part of the reason this network was created, incidentally, was about finding the research joy again for a bunch of real tired academics, quite frankly, and finding a place for people to share work in progress and things like that too. So yeah, I
can relate to that, because the class I'm covering, it was 1914 to 1940s, and I need to talk about men's clothes. I need to talk about decades that I don't really know anything about. And I'm just going, how do I make this interesting for me? Like, I don't know. Well, so I can relate now a little bit more.
The nice thing about university is they're there to learn. It doesn't always have to be interesting. There's a pro tip for you.
I know, but I have to be interested.
I know. A lot of us are slaves to the edutainment vibe. So that's true. Cheyney, what about you?
With the mute. So I would like to first shout out Carolyn Schmidt. She was in charge of the Gentile Art Society, which was kind of like a reenactor conference. She was the one. So I started my YouTube channel a long time ago, and I really just did it in order to help Black living historians at historic sites. We are all very isolated from one another. We're a lot more connected and combined. I mean, like I was with a group of 7 Black living history people last night, but that wasn't the case 8-10 years ago. So I would get us, I would do a video about how to tie a head wrap and show them images of paintings from the period or photography from the period. And through that, people started to open up their private collections. Carolyn Schmidt was one of them. And through that, I was able to go deeper into, she had in her collection, she said, I'm not sure if this was a dress worn by an enslaved woman, but we know for a fact that it came from this plantation. The period is right, the construction is right. And looking at the construction, I could recreate a dress of an enslaved woman from the period. That would have never happened if I didn't have a YouTube channel. So it allowed me to expand and do a lot more, get deeper into what I was doing. And it gave me access that I would have never had. I mean, some of these people that I regularly interact with now and have great relationships with, I don't think if I didn't have a YouTube channel, I don't think that they would have opened their collections to me. They're like, off with you, go away.
That's interesting, and also kind of a shame, because the idea around collections really is that anybody should be able to go in and research and access. You shouldn't have to have academic credentials, but I know that in prioritizing things that maybe, especially obviously the last couple of years, has been difficult. Yeah.
But I would say for my research, known collections are kind of a little bit useless to me because clothing of enslaved and free Black people, that's not something that was collected, and a lot of times when people had them, they didn't know what it was. So being around women reenactors in America, they collect originals. You will walk into some of their bedrooms, and in a corner, they have a stack of giant acid-free boxes with just beautifully intact 1860s dresses. And they can say exactly which estate it came from. So I'm looking for like working class dresses, but I would have never been able to connect with these people if I didn't have a YouTube channel. And so I just became known for being able to appropriately recreate dresses of enslaved women between 1850 and 1864.
That's a really amazing kind of pro tip on why we should maybe all be out there a bit more, because, I think there's a lot of us who keep going to the same collections, looking at the same things. Like, hang on, I got to go to the V&A again today and look at that dress again. So absolutely. And I know obviously Abby she was talking, those are things in your own collection too. So that's really, that I'm sure we're all like, ooh, and probably a lot of jealous people out there too, wanting to get into some of that. Bernadette, do you want to talk about that one a bit?
Yeah, I'll definitely echo what Abby said about having the time, which is an extraordinary benefit. I mean, you run your own entity effectively. You get to decide what projects you want to work on. I will also add that it is extremely freeing in terms of the finances to do it, because I mean, you can apply for grants to go do research, but those grants will always be smaller than what a giant corporation is willing to give you for a 60-second ad in a YouTube video, which is wonderful. I will, however, maybe offer a little counterpoint in that there are so many skills involved in YouTube that, like, the script writing, the filming, the marketing, the social media has actually almost in a way detracted from the time I'm able to spend on my research. I'm sure you other ladies know, but I mean, at some point you just sort of have to pick and choose. What do I feel like working on? What do I feel like putting time into? Because ultimately your video's got a deadline. You've got to put it up at some point. You cannot keep research. I mean, you can research for 4 months, but you're not going to have a YouTube, you're going to have one YouTube video out of it, and then what? So, I mean, fortunately,
I was just like, can you walk us through that a little bit more? Because that's a really interesting point. I'm not sure how many people know exactly how much work goes in behind it. And you just said things about like deadlines and marketing and the script, and like you have to decide what's put, and also you're picking and choosing the content to what your audience is going to enjoy. I know from, I mean, I just know from the one in Abby and I sat for hours and hours and hours and hours. And obviously any of us, a lot of people over here done filming too. We know how much ends up on the cutting room floor as well, even when you're, you know, doing your BBC or whatever, things like that. But like, you're doing this like mostly on your own, I think, but now you guys are starting to get more staff help and contracting.
You have to, at a certain point, like there, you cannot do it all on your own. And I know we've all tried and it kills you. I mean, I spent a couple of years doing this on my own and basically just not, I don't have a life. I don't take days off. I don't sleep, you know, until recently when I've started, I've hired a research assistant. I've hired an editor, people to help me to do some of this, help with some of this work. And I think there's even more opportunity to expand on that. Why are we doing this all on our own? Why is one person, like, why do I have access to these extraordinary corporate grants effectively when that money can fund a lot of people's research? You know, hey, do we want to collaborate and write a script together? Do you want to come on and present it, or do you want me to present it? Do we get another presenter in? Like, do you want to be a script writer? Do you want to be a research consultant? Like Robin and I, and actually we've all had this conversation about how many potential job opportunities for a variety of dress historians are within YouTube, even if there are only, you know, right now, I mean, everyone can have a YouTube channel if you want, but even within the YouTube channels that exist, there are so many opportunities for employment.
I mean, that is amazing because you're kind of starting to talk about, you know, a program now, but you found, I mean, this thing is this platform works. And I was just chatting with someone earlier today who was visiting, and they were asking about a particular television program on the BBC. And I won't mention who the presenter is. They're not here or part of our network. And they are somebody who gets seen quite often. And they were saying, you know, oh, I loved hearing the people in the archive speaking and the people, but the presenter themselves didn't seem to know. And, you know, it's that kind of, but you guys do know, and you've created this amazing platform. You know, is there a channel out there in this? Is there something, I don't know, like, it is exciting. How would anybody do that? How do you envision this going forward if, say, we've got some budding dress historians in the audience who are probably right now like, oh my God, I'd love to do research for you. Like, how will that develop out, do you think? Or even old ones?
Good question. I mean, we're all still at a point where we're trying to figure out what we're doing. I don't have my own life together. I've still got way too many emails to deal with every day. So like, there is not even a means to contact me that isn't through my agent, just because there isn't time. So I mean, that's my own issue, but you know, I don't know if Abby and Cheyney have, but I do think like go ahead.
Cheyney, do you have anything you want to add to that?
I think I really want to encourage people to start creating for themselves as well, and use that as kind of, because the people I've contacted to help me, for example, with my social media, with my TikTok, are people who have content up and a little bit of content, but they kind of want to help out with other channels. And so I've reached out to them and say, hey, I love what you're doing. Would you like to do more of it? Would you like to help out? And that's what a few of my colleagues are doing as well. So I would always encourage to put out what you're interested in, even if it's just a image of a painting that you have been researching, or because people get an idea of where your center is, and also what type of research you're doing.
And then you're also that you have a sense too of how it works and what's going on and what's involved, and you've put a little work. That would be true for any job, wouldn't it? You want someone who's like, oh, look some of your CV. It seems like you actually, yeah, exactly. Abby, did you want to add something to that? I'll get back to my little question list here too. Go ahead.
I'm trying to think, because I felt like it was a multifaceted question.
It was growing into the skill set question. And actually, maybe I'll just say, all of you guys are all you're entrepreneurs and you're business owners. This is not like just cool chicks putting out videos. It's serious business.
Yeah. So with that, like, I mean, I think all of us, I'm not as aware of like Bernadette's situation. I can speak, like Cheyney and I are both LLC'd. I'm actually an S Corp. So like I paid myself a W-2 this year. So for those of you who are not citizens of the United States, a W-2 is one of our many ridiculous tax forms that we have because apparently our government can't do math. Uh, it can, it just wants us to do it too. But I was able to pay myself a salary, like legally pay myself a salary with a W-2 that shows like I was employed by a business, which is my own. We are able to legally employ people and go through that whole process. And that's something that is kind of like my goal right now, is to grow my business. So I have, like Bernadette, I've hired a freelance editor. I've brought on Kenna as my research assistant and like script editor. And so I'm able to help fund other dress historians and other creative people. And like Bernadette said, our AdSense money, our sponsorship money, you know, we're able to take that and push it right back out into our own community, and allow us to have a minute to breathe and take a nap, because sometimes that doesn't happen. I don't know how Cheyney does it, to be honest. I'm like, how do you have like a normal 9 to 5 and then you have like Not Your Mama's History, and like you have this huge YouTube following, you have this huge Instagram following, like you're busting out all these TikToks and you still have to go to meetings. I don't know how she does it. Like
I don't know either, friend. I don't know either, friend.
But you do it, and we're so grateful. And actually, on that, I want to come back to this living history question. We talked about this again, and I was absolutely fascinated, particularly Cheyney. Do you want to? I just want to hand it over. Living history. Talk to us about this situation.
Ooh.
I guess for context, the question here is about kind of the legitimacy of living history and what we have been doing and maybe where we should be going with this. And yeah, actually, you know, I love the chat's been lively and I can't wait to read the chat later. I can't, and I know there's lots of questions too. I don't know if there's any living history reenactors or anybody out there too you could say in the chat, but okay, Cheyney.
Here in America, we've started the conversation about costuming and when is it appropriate and when isn't it appropriate. It's very complex and it's very wrapped up in identity politics. So let's jump into Civil War reenacting. So Civil War reenacting in the United States, depending on what side you're fighting for. There are a lot of history nerds who are just excited about the Civil War and reenacting, and as battles go, they may one battle be fighting on the Confederacy, the other battle they're fighting with the Union. But there's an entire sector that's very neo-Confederate. And when I went to my first reenactment, the 150th Gettysburg, when I was walking through the parking lot, I saw actual white supremacist bumper stickers and things like that. It actually gave me pause. Do I really want to participate in this? And so we're coming to this place where we're asking ourselves, is going to a plantation and reenacting a civilian scene on a plantation appropriate? Like, is it appropriate? I'm not talking about like going to a tea party at a tea salon and having a fun time in historical clothing. I'm talking about going to sites of enslavement and dressing up and having a private event, having fun. Is that appropriate? And those are the conversations.
Including even like corporate events and weddings.
Yes.
And all of these
Absolutely.
Kind of things. Yeah.
Are those appropriate? And then on the other side, we have historic sites who have people dress up in historical clothing and costuming, and And sometimes it's in first person, sometimes it's on a plantation, sometimes it's in an entire town. Is it appropriate for people to be in costuming? And it doesn't get gimmicky. Why are people in historical clothing in this time? And then there's also wrapped up, I find I had to look internally in myself and ask myself, why am I dressing in these clothes? Is this the proper time? And I think that I'm speaking as myself and the reenacting community as a whole. Sometimes the reenacting community likes to add, how do I say this? Noble ideals and pursuits as to why they're dressing up. If I weren't here doing this Civil War reenacting, this story would not be told. I'm here to say it's arrogance. If you like dressing in historical clothing, say that. But in order to justify the cost of your hobby, do not add nobler ideas to it than it actually is. And so for me, I do gather with friends sometimes, and we dress in early 20th century clothes, and we take pictures and we have fun. That's what it is, and be very, very direct about that. And I know that, yes, reenactors have usually, when they have events, they put money in a pot to donate to the site. But you can't tell me there aren't other creative ways of coming up with the money.
Yeah.
That's just my personal.
My head is exploding with things. I'm like, and that's why artistic dress, but no, you're not here to hear from me today. But as and Abby and I talked about in a video, the history bounding and all these things is an interesting solution, because it kind of says, by the way, this is all fantasy anyway, isn't it? It's not real. So who cares if you're wearing your waistcoat with your jeans and you're this and you're that? Like, get a grip. Which is a wonderful thing. Thank you to your generations for loosening us all up around that, I think. But Cheyney, also, I just want to say, this is your ideas on this have changed over the last couple of years. Is that right? You've kind of rethought all of this.
Shifting.
Oh, there you go. Okay, go ahead. You're good.
My ideas on this have constantly been evolving and shifting. I also realized I had these feelings for a long time, but you have to understand, I have a lot of friends in the reenacting community. The reenacting community is also my community. And I think...
There you go. Sorry, your sound came in and it's coming in and out a little bit. I think we've lost you. There it goes. Is your battery dying maybe in your thingy?
Can you hear me?
Yes, perfect.
Much better. So I did not want to hurt my friends, but I slowly started to tell my truth and say, I do not think it's appropriate when people go to do reenactments and then they say, oh, but it makes me feel uncomfortable to reenact an enslaver or to reenact, but you've decided to reenact in a time period where you as a white person are on a daily basis benefiting and a part of a slave society.
Yeah.
So you can't just pick piecemeal your experience. And it's only recently that I've just become a little bit more vocal. Honestly, it's because I've gotten more support from people, and I'm not alone in saying it out loud anymore. And that's a bit of, I would say on some level, I was being a little bit cowardly and that I didn't want to lose my friends and I didn't want to lose my community. But at some point, you kind of have to say, you claim to love me and care about me, but what you're doing is hurting me. It turns my stomach to see people prancing around on plantations in historical clothing without actually telling a full, complete story, because they're not there to tell the full, complete story. They're there to have a good time. And I would feel better if they would just say that, but wrapping it up in a educational event.
Yeah. I think your leadership in this is really, really admirable. And, you know, especially because so many heritage bodies, certainly here in the UK, hopefully also in the United States, are going through decolonizing processes of their collections. We also need to think about it in interpretation, and they are, but I don't know how far they're thinking about it in terms of places that do costume interpretation. So that it's, you know, thank you for what you're saying and doing actually. And I hope a lot more people pick up on that. I think from that, because it's sort of related, I wanted to ask you guys about ideas of authenticity in what you wear or what you make or what you do, like what's the value of authenticity, and particularly for anyone who you know, you do wear these things out into the world and such. Anybody want any takers? Bernadette, do you want to dive into that one?
There's no such thing as historical accuracy. I mean, that was like lesson number one that I was taught when I first started doing historical reconstruction work, is that like, unless we're working in non-temperature controlled, non-electrically lit environments, we haven't had our vaccinations and our entire upbringings of modern health, like we have to, there's no way, we cannot physically like put ourselves in the physical bodies of the humans that had the hands who were making those clothes. So to weaponize historical accuracy is just not fair. To come after people, to attack people, whatever, it's not worth it. But at the same time, I think there are many factors that are in your control that you can try and get as closely as possible to use at least roughly the same fiber content, whether or not we can get the same species of linen that existed in the 18th century, just using linen. Trying to look at the diagrams in the 19th century sewing guides, to look at how they're holding their hands, so that you can kind of get a sense at how they would be doing the stitches, and therefore how the stitches would have turned out and how that would affect the garment. There are always things to be learned by striving for as much authenticity as possible. You know, we can gather little bits and crumbs and sort of try and put them together to build this idea, maybe get a little bit closer, take a couple more steps of what it might have been like to live in the past, but with the knowledge that we are effectively on an endless, this game has no end, but we're just here to learn. And that's in a weird way kind of freeing.
Yeah. And we've been talking a lot, obviously, about remaking and reenactment, when actually there's like those of us are like, oh, no, hang on, we're historians. We want to study the thing and understand the original things. And actually then it has to be. And of course, we're the first ones to scream at the film, television screen, et cetera, all depending. Like Outlander doesn't bother me a bit. I know it bothers other people, but boy, when I saw Desperate Romantics about the Pre-Raphaelites, my head exploded constantly, you know, so we all have our niches too. So like, yeah, go ahead.
It's that's a whole other conversation that we could have, is like depictions of historical things on media, and that like especially the three of us who are in this position as content, this stuff that does so well on YouTube is, you know, expert, that it's like the formula, expert analyzes experts.
Bridgerton.
Yeah. So like lab analyst analyzes chemistry scenes in films, dress historian analyzes this, and they want to know, is it accurate or is it not? Like ultimately, we know the answer is no, regardless of how close that they get. But you know, that SEO, the search engine optimization, does serve to draw people in, and that can have a benefit, because you draw people in to say, Outlander's not historically accurate, but why don't we compare it with extant examples and paintings and drawings of the period to see what 18th century dress would have looked like. And now you're drawing in this whole other audience of people who didn't think they were interested in a lecture on 18th century dress, but all of a sudden they've learned so much about 18th century dress. And I do think that that's very valuable.
Yeah. Abby,
sorry, Robin.
No, it's Abby. I saw it.
Well, I've been kind of thinking about like the two. Also, I don't know what I look like to everyone else, but I literally have like Cheyney down here and like Bernadette's up here and like you're right below me. So I kind of like ping pong in between the two of them. But like kind of thinking about what Cheyney's brought up, which is something that like I've been wrestling with as someone who has never like identified as a reenactor, but obviously my time at Colonial Williamsburg was spent in costume, but I was also studying dress, like it was very closely connected. And then also like Bernadette's talking about this concept of like reconstruction work and the fallacy of accuracy and how the, you know, how you interact with reconstruction work with historic clothing it's different for everybody, you know. And there's like this challenge right now, something that I'm struggling with, of finding this balance of I learn about history through clothing. Like that's how I explore history of society and history of culture. How do I interact with that history while also knowing that by studying these antique garments, reconstructing these antique garments as best as I can, following the primary sources, following originals, trying to source the original fabrics, you know. And then there's also the concept of embodying the clothing to understand how it moves on the body, how a woman would move in a space wearing these clothing, these garments, and how it would affect her body to better understand people in the past and how society functioned, how people moved, how people operated within space and held space. Like it's just this thing, because it's like Cheyney said, we need to be respectful of the places that we are in and the places that we go, while also finding a way to pursue this other side of this work, which is still valid, you know. And you know, as a woman, I am very protective of dress history because it has so long been invalidated as not a valid form of study, mostly through misogyny of just the history of art as a whole. And so like this balance is really tricky. And I do think with YouTube there is a kind of a bubble almost of protection, because I can, you know, present it in a way that it's like, this is just what I'm doing and I'm going to make it in my 2019 suburban house, like, you know, and explore it, but you can still go outside and function within it. And so I think this world, it's changing, and how we operate within this form of history in a way that is respectful is changing. But I just kind of like tagging off of both of.
Well, you've all hit on something really important here, and it is that embodiment thing, and what we can learn about history through. I mean, we can't go into collections and put on dresses and start walking around and seeing, right? But you can do this, and there are these spaces you can do it in, and you know, I always think about, and with what you just said too, about how I've understood certain items of furniture in relationship to clothing, which I have definitely seen men roll their eyes at me when I say Charles Rennie Mackintosh designed that chair for her skirt, and they're like, no, you know, and we can understand material culture more widely through these practices. And that to me is incredibly valuable. I have two quick questions on the list before we wrap it up for our big question today. There's a huge number of Q&A, which is amazing. I wanted so the first thing was, what are some of the issues and is there a key issue? And I think we have just touched on this too, that you most hope to tackle through your work, like the subversive, great, you're out there doing these things and you're sharing, but is there some real thing you'd really like to tackle?
Is it okay if I go?
Yeah, go ahead.
I think for me, the thing that I constantly struggle with when it comes to the research side of my work is the fact that I am limited. You know, the fact that the stories that I can tell are only the stories from a Western Anglo-American perspective of a white woman. I can talk about lower class. I love talking about lower class, love talking about middle class, as well as higher social classes and the working class woman the mantua makers, the milliners, but my storytelling is limited because of several different factors. And I feel very like hyper aware of that, where like a few years ago, I never would have been aware of it in the same way. And I think with our international audiences, it is imperative that they understand that we're not trying to speak for all of history or even every Western European country. Like that's just not possible. Like I can't read German. I can speak to kind of blanket, like, yeah, at this point in time, we're doing this, but it's like, I can't speak to German folkdrecht. Like I can't do that. I can't speak to other cultures and other societies. And so it's grappling with how do I balance my storytelling and the what I'm able to study and the stories that I'm able to tell in a way that people understand that it's like, I am telling a very limited story. This is a very small corner of the world.
Yeah. Bernadette or Cheyney, I see you going on mute. You go. No, Cheyney, go.
And leaping a little bit from that, stop looking for people to tell your stories and tell your stories. I constantly get people in comment section saying, you didn't talk about these Black folks in this region or these Black folks in this region. And I can't wait to tell more stories. But I am just one person at the table. And my overall goal has always been to bring more people to the table. I'm not here to change everyone and make them tell my stories. I'm here to tell the stories of my ancestors and bring more of my community to the table. Make room for more people. And in that, I think my biggest challenge is just focusing in and just stop trying to do too much. And I get so many emails from people from around the country with, here's a story that I really want you to tell. And I'm like, yes, I'll tell that story. And then I'm racing off to Virginia. And then I'm racing off to North Carolina. And I think that's the biggest challenge, to focus in on a few stories and tell those stories. Because as Abby said, I unfortunately am not a full-time content creator. I wish I was, but I also love my job at New York Historical Society. I love my job. And I feel I get a lot of fulfillment from both parts. But yes,
I think
I need more sleep.
That's so inspiring. And you just reminded me of something in when we had a little preliminary conversation to talk about this, that you inspired me about telling your story, because we started talking about size. Because that's my thing. I've always wanted to and would have loved, but I felt like my size didn't fit. And we've talked about that. We didn't get a chance to talk. Maybe we can talk in questions or after, but that's another one too, is space for other bodies. And you guys all do talk about that in your work. Body, we could have had a whole session just talking about body, because you've all worked on that in various ways, in brilliant ways that I really admire. Bernadette, do you want to do that one? And then I think we'll turn it over to questions. Okay. So one thing that you would like to.
Well, relatedly to the previous two absolutely brilliant responses is time. I mean, ultimately, I think that's what it boils down to, is there's only so much time in the day. There's only so much that one person can do. And it's absolutely true that this myth that this is the pantheon of YouTubers who are covering all of dress history, it's absolute garbage. There is so much of dress history that is not being told. And this is why, like, I mean, there is room. I know there's this misconception that, like, how do you even get into? Yes, there is room for you. The best time to start was yesterday, but now is also a pretty decent time to start. part of the reason why I started YouTube is because I was racing to finish this, or at least started to post my videos, was because I was racing to finish the hem on an 18th century reconstruction that I was doing by hand that I swore I would do before the end of the year, and it was New Year's Eve, and I was stressed, and I was like, why isn't there a beautifully relaxing YouTube channel about hand sewing that I can just have on to calm down? Hang on, I can make that. If you feel like there's an area in this world of dress history entertainment that you feel is not being covered, you're probably not alone in that. Yeah. There are probably other people out there who will want to hear what you have to say. So hopefully, cumulatively, we can work together to solve the challenge of not having enough time.
Including us. Like,
yeah,
I want to see dress history channels about Japanese dress and everything else.
I did notice in the chat, people were talking about that. So I'm so glad you said it. And I'm going to give a plug for Bernadette, because she also has a course on Skillshare. And you've said Skillshare is an amazing place to go. If you've got something to do, go put yourself up there. She's got a hand sewing course up there that I've been starting to do. That's great. So that it's not just YouTube. There's all these other kind of places.
Teaching on Skillshare is a fantastic platform. If you just have teaching, you're not so big on the distribution and the marketing and the algorithms of YouTube. Skillshare is such a great platform just for teaching, especially practical skills if you've got crafty skills. But also if you're feeling like you've got information to share, I mean, this is tying back to our previous conversation, but there is so much opportunity for teaming up with other people who already have platforms, and just working together, collaborating. I mean, this is something that I'm personally hoping to get more into, is to bring the marketing skills that I've developed through YouTube to try and help other people either, onto my platform or have platforms of their own. Just, there's so much information that this whole field is lacking.
I think it's fantastic. Now, the last question I had on my list, I'll throw out before, and if our question masters want to come on screen to join us, but the last question I had is, and you just have to, so you could stew for a minute, you just have to pick one. What is the myth that you would like our network to help you bust? What's the worst myth? and let's not say corsets, we all know. Yeah, what's the biggest myth we should be busting?
I
have mine.
Wait, Bernadette, go ahead. What?
That women were all just small and weak and dumb.
Yeah, that's a really good one. Abby?
That silk is only for higher upper echelon of social classes, and that the variety of fabrics worn by the variety of social classes is broad and vast and colorful and diverse and interesting. And that just because you see something shiny in a museum exhibition doesn't necessarily mean it was only for the Astors.
That's a really, really good one, actually. Really, really good. Cheyney, do you have a favorite myth?
Oh my gosh, people are gonna come for me. The Underground Railroad quilts. There were not codes sewn into quilts. It didn't happen. There's a very rich Black American tradition of quilting, and you see a lot of beautiful patterns, very Giesman's quilts, amazing examples, but the codes sewn within the quilts on the Underground Railroad, beautiful story, but it didn't happen.
Excellent. Thank you. Okay, I'm just saying, because there's an order to your question masters you've figured out. Is that right? Who's up first? And Kate's going to kick it off.
I'm going to
kick it. So Kate, Lynn, and Anna are going to take turns pulling questions from the chat now, and I am going to mute myself and kick back.
Thanks, Robin. God, that was amazing, and I'm glad I'm glad I can just read the questions and not have to, because it was just my head is kind of spinning. So the order of the questions are that these are the questions on the upvote that have had the most kind of reaction to. So it's just coming in an order of things that people really want to know the answers to this. So first up is from Sam, who says, as a disabled person, I'm really interested in finding out more about the history of disabled people through their clothes. Do any of the panelists have any insight into how to research this and find out more? Any examples of clothes they have seen which they found really interesting? I don't know who wants to go.
Do you want to go first? Do you have anything you want to say to this? Because I do have something I would like to say to this.
You go first.
Okay. So a couple of things that I just kind of like stumbled into. First was when I actually worked at American Duchess. We had a woman, a customer call, and she used a wheelchair, and she might have been partially blind. I do not remember. But when we were talking about shoes for her, she actually told us, she was like, I love your side lacing shoes and your boots because they're easy for my assistant to put on my feet. And in that moment, it was this light went off where it was like, even if they didn't intend for it to be accessible, the fact is that this mid-Victorian style side lacing boot is a much more accessible shoe for modern people today because it's easier to put on. And the same thing goes for buckled shoes as well. Just kind of having this conversation with her about how to put the shoe, like which shoes she liked, because it made her, it made it easier for her, and she felt good. She liked her shoes. It made her feel more confident and comfortable. So that was really interesting, just kind of the existence of these clothing, of these garments. I actually, in my collection, I have a couple of really interesting pieces. And one of them is a 1882, maybe it was 1879, definitely like homemade gown, and it has its bodice, it has its apron, overskirt, and it has the original skirt with it. And when we're looking at it flat on the table, it looks normal, it looks great. You're like, oh, look, she tried, she's so cute, look how cute she is, she tried so hard to make a cute dress. We put it on the mannequin. She had severe scoliosis. You could see it in how the skirt was hanging. You could see it in how the bodice, the center back line of the bodice hung. The moment we put it on a plastic mannequin, her story just came out, and it was like, oh my God. Like, had no idea, looking flat on the table, how this history of this wear of this woman. So that was just incredible for me. Also, she's an 1870s bodice. We named her Mima several years ago because she was like really short, but she had a widow's hump, and you can see it in how the garment is cut. And so I think one of the things that we kind of forget about with historic clothing is that since clothes were custom made to the individual for so long, there is more accessibility in that because it's made for the individual. We're not dealing with knit t-shirts, with teeny tiny armholes. We're not dealing with rudimentary sizes that are basically designed to fail and to make everyone, regardless of how large or how small you are, feel uncomfortable in your own clothing. So I just found that really interesting that you can kind of see these things happen, whether it's unintentionally or not. When it comes to doing research, I think getting into newspapers, trying to find, starting with well-known people who you can identify, and then kind of digging into that a little bit further, working backwards and finding stories and things like that. So that's kind of, okay, that's it for me.
Also echo the importance of looking at actual extant clothes as much as you can, especially small collections who might be more willing to work with you, put things on forms if the clothes are stable enough. Whereas, a lot of the larger collections are flat on the table and you can't touch it, but there's also some fantastic vintage if you're getting into collecting, but like Abby does, so that you can see them for yourself. But disability is such a broad spectrum. There's all sorts of effects on the clothes that you can have from a disabled body, depending on how you function, but you will have the best eye for that. And I think a lot of these collections can actually benefit from your knowledge, knowing, oh, it's cut like this because this person has asymmetry, or it's worn here because this arm rubs a bit closer to the rib cage than this one does because her spine shape. You will be able to recognize these idiosyncrasies of the clothes a lot better than people without disability. So I think that's very useful for everyone, really.
Agreed.
And I echoing Bernadette, that's why we need more people at the table. For example, recently at a plantation site, they came across a grouping of items in the wall of a plantation home, and they said it was a rat's nest. Like a rat gathered these things and put it in, but then having a person who practice traditional African spiritual practices, they're like, wait, so they're grabbing crystals and carving a cosmogram into this crystal and collecting broken glassware and putting it very meticulously into the wall. It wasn't that the conservationist or the curator was being dismissive, I don't know, but having another eye there saying, wait a minute, there's something here. This isn't just like a rat's nest. This was specifically placed here by enslaved Africans 200 years ago. This is something. And having someone on staff in that moment made the world of a difference between it being classified as a rat's nest or being classified as spiritual items.
That's amazing. Lynn, I think Lynn is up next. And I just want to say you've got 40 questions in the Q&A, ladies, and 15 minutes left. So you take turns or whatever. But also, I think what we might too, if you're willing, is we can take the copies of the questions and maybe think about writing up a post or maybe doing a little talkie or something and addressing some of the questions later, if there's some interesting ones, if you're willing. So anyway, Lynn, go ahead.
Great. I think that's a great idea, Robin, because there are lots of absolutely wonderful questions coming through. Well, I'm going to ask the next most popular one, and this is from Rachel. Does a pattern library exist or a pattern conservatory? Basically, is there something like archive.org for sewing patterns, ladies?
If there is,
I would like one.
No.
That sounds great.
But that sounds like a fantastic area of research for someone to get into if one so wanted.
Yeah, I mean, I can say simplicity is all burned. So if that's what you were kind of thinking of, it will not come from simplicity. They all burned many, many years ago.
Shame. Okay, Anna, I'm going to hand over to you for the next question.
Okay, so I got another one from Rachel, and this is a really practical one. Adapting daily skirt length for modern life. For example, how to keep skirts from getting caught under the rolling office chair. What is the right length to avoid that? Is it 5 inches up from the floor, 8 inches? Does it depend on the circumference of the hem? So this is a real getting into the nitty gritty of you makers.
B, that's all you.
I think both Bernadette and I wear longer skirts on a daily basis. I have to say that as I have become larger, there's more of me to go around. With more fabric on my skirt, the lengths had to change to not get caught in the rolling chair in my office. I say for me is an inch below mid-calf.
I will say in a long skirt sitting in a rolly chair right now. I haven't really adapted my clothes. I've adapted my physicality to my clothes. That was subconscious, but I mean, that's also a possibility. I'm sitting like this, so I'm not sure that helps, but I will turn and then get up out of the chair rather than scooching the chair back. I don't know. There are two approaches here. You adapt your clothes to suit you, or you adapt to suit your clothes, whatever. Both options are valid.
Cool, thank you.
Kate, you want to do the next one?
Yeah. So Julia asks, I'm a history graduate, never really thought, oh, hang on, moving. Never really thought I'd want to pursue an academic path. I'm a high school teacher until I started sewing and discovered fashion history. But I can't find many specialist courses on the subject. It feels like it's a relatively new subject, or feels like. Any advice, hints, bibliography, etc., for anyone wanting to get into the fashion history world?
Robin, do you want me to take this one, or do you want to take this one?
Well, I'll throw in real quickly. Join our network. It's kind of what we do, and there are programs out there. But whether you find a job at the end of that, that's why we're talking about these things today. So Abby, go ahead.
Okay, so off the top of my head, it depends on where you're located. I saw someone put in Dress Historian Society. If you're located in the United States, it's going to be CSA, or Costume Society of America. That's our professional organization. When it comes to academic fields of like programs, there are not a lot. So in the United States, you're going to have like Winter. If Nebraska's program is still alive, I don't know what happened to it, but Nebraska had a program in the continent. You can go up to University of University of Alberta in Edmonton, and BSNet is there. I know that there's,
we want New York FIT.
If you want to spend the money, BARD and FIT.
Ryerson actually in Canada, I would say, before Edmonton. Sorry, I shouldn't say that. Yeah.
And then of course there's the dress history program at the University of Glasgow. And I'm sure there are other ones too in the UK. Yeah, Courthold.
I'll interject and say dress history programs are fantastic, and they're very new, and they're still coming up. But all throughout the 20th century and the 21st century, people have been dress historians and have been studying dress history without necessarily having a degree specialty. Janet Arnold studied fashion design. All of my mentors and colleagues who have trained me have all come up through theater and film costume design. So it's definitely possible to study dress history perfectly reasonably, as long as you take the initiative and realize, like, I'm interested in the history and this is how I need to do. People study art history too as well, and just go in specifically with the knowledge that this is what I want to study, and I'm going to seek out, I'm going to speak with my professors and connect with people who can connect me with people. And you don't have to have a dress history degree to be a valid dress historian.
I think maybe this is a good question for the network to go ahead and also take on, because we've all come from different backgrounds, and maybe we can make a little post about how do you do this. That might be a good thing for us to do. So
I get asked that all the time.
It might have been you who said this, but I read someone's Facebook comment once that said dress history is not a qualification, it's a job title.
Maybe.
That sounds like something Robin would say.
Yeah.
It's because you can come to these things in so many different ways, and it is difficult. I think because some programs have been, well, this is a whole thing. They get really specific, like Abby and I have an MLit in decorative arts and design history. I mean, what is that? Like, it's all material culture, cultural historian, yeah, we'll take this on. I think that might be a good little project for us to kind of talk about with our group and put something out there.
Well, I discovered that.
I was going to let Lynn do the next question. So
that's fine. It's fine. Don't worry.
There's another question here from Julia, which I think is an interesting one. Anyone else think that maybe all these different types of academia, archaeology, have it harder to find respect or be taken more seriously because it is a feminine field, or mostly feminine, whereas war, economic history, etc., has a respect and a reputation that I don't believe fashion or domestic life history do? There's a big topic. Yeah.
I only heard part of that question, but so was it like why we think that, or do
you think that all these different types of academia, archaeology, have it harder to find respect because it's mostly a feminine field?
Yes.
I think that's a big yes from everybody. Yeah.
I mean, like I mentioned, even within history of art, like Robin and I were saying, like my undergraduate degree was in history of art. We did decorative arts and design history, and just trying to get someone who thought sculpture and painting was superior to embroidery on a silk gown to like pay attention to the validity of the garment as a piece of art was impossible, especially but then I would get angry, because it's like, oh, Jan van Eyck, he's amazing. He was also an apprentice to a trade. Just like a dressmaker and a tailor were apprentices to trades. Just because he might have made more money doesn't mean that his actual study process and how to ply his trade, which has now been held up as this pinnacle of art, he was still a tradesman. He still had apprenticeships. He still served I'm sorry, I can really go on to this one. It makes me really big mad.
Well, I have to say, as an embroiderer, I feel exactly the same. So, get on my high horse about that one.
Yeah,
Cheyney and Bernadette, have you got anything you want to throw in there into the mix?
Not if we want to be conscious of time.
if the consensus is yes.
Yeah, I thought it would be.
Yeah. Anna, go ahead.
Okay, I'm so enjoying this conversation. I can't quite believe what I'm hearing. It's so good. Okay, so here's one from Bo Basil. And Bo Basil says, I am no snob at historically accurate fabric for my dress endeavors, but how not to look like I'm wearing a curtain, like Scarlett O'Hara's green curtain dress. Again, it's a practical one. How do you not look like you're wearing a curtain?
Can I just say, just real quick, I am not a dress historian, but I tend to find the uglier the fabric, the closer to the originals. At least that's like looking at examples. I kind of hideous. And so I find like, if you look like my Mima's curtain, you got it right.
Okay.
I think it's also the good Cher and Bob Mackie adage. You wear the clothes, do not let the clothing wear you. So if you're going to get dressed and you're going to get dressed up, own it. Do not allow yourself to feel uncomfortable.
Yeah, I would also say that doing historical research for fun and because you think it will improve the outcome or will make you like the outcome of your product more does not make you a snob. Just because people on Instagram are going to call you don't listen to them. If it brings you joy, then do the research and go on that quest to seek out, the closest information you possibly can. If you want to make your item out of thrifted curtains, that is also perfectly wonderful. You do you.
Great answer.
I think with that, like people trying to call you snobs, I think people don't realize that it's like, ultimately you're doing this for you. Yeah. So whatever boundaries you operate in within this, it's entirely up to you. And I think this is kind of a reflection of the human condition where like people project that other people are discussing their decisions. Like when the reality, most people are way too busy to care. And those who do vocalize are usually just assholes. I'm sorry, who are just like not nice people. But like 99% of people don't like. They're like, yeah, whatever makes you happy. Like, have a good one. Or they
have their own personal issues going on, and they're putting that on to you. They're having not a good time in their personal life, and they're saying, "Oh, well, you're just being a snob because you look so great," and they just don't like that. So
I think that is definitely the case. They want you to do something different. Whereas if you went up to them and commented on their video, hey, I think you should be doing what I'm doing instead of what you're doing, it's exactly the same. It's their internal securities that they are projecting onto you. They're not really happy with what they're doing. So they look at you and say, why don't you do what I'm doing so I feel better about what I'm doing?
So wear the curtain and own it. Let's do one more loop of questions. I think this is so good, and there's so many, but we'll run a little bit over, but let's do one more pass through our question masters.
Well, I was going to, so the next most popular question is Nicole's, but it kind of, you've sort of answered that. Her question was that she feels that there's been a growing sense of divide in historical clothing and costuming community. And she wants to talk about the idea of kind of gatekeeping historical costuming. And she's saying, what are your thoughts on the idea that people who can't afford historically accurate pieces might be afraid of participating because of ridicule and rejection? So I guess she's kind of asking what you guys were just saying about that. But I can see people are a bit fearful sometimes of taking part.
I would like to add something to this because I don't think a lot of people realize this, but I have been a part of this community in various capacities for at least 10 years now. over 10 years. And I have been called every name under the sun, including but not limited to a butter churner, because God forbid I wear the clothing of the working class, as well as a pretty princess, usually within just months of each other. And so to that, I say, do what you want and screw everyone else, because it doesn't matter. Someone's gonna want to talk shit. Someone's gonna want to gatekeep. Someone's gonna want to try to bring you down, because like Cheyney said, like Bernadette said, it's not actually about you. It's about them. And your presence and your space makes them uncomfortable, and they are seeing their shadow reflected in the mirror. And so in order to make themselves feel better, they're going to try to bring you down. So don't worry about it. And if people try to gatekeep, they're not people you want to be in the gate with anyways. That's the bad yard. Get out of the yard. It's not a good one. Like, there are plenty of people around who are just like, cool, you made this out of little trash bags and curtains. Sounds amazing. I want to see more of this. Or it'd be like, I had this fabric custom woven for this project. Awesome. Show me more of this. Like that, those are the yards you want to go into. And so if anyone's trying to gatekeep, get out. It's not worth it. I promise. There's better people.
Okay.
I know that costuming can be cost prohibitive. And to deny that would be elitist. But I think most of us did not start with many different hand-sewn items. If you remember back to the beginning, I was able to purchase my first grouping kit for reenacting by working at Lane Bryant, McDonald's, and as a desk clerk, all at the same time. That's how I was able to afford the linen to hand sew terribly, I may add, my undergarments. You have to start someplace. A lot of this is actually did not start in the costuming community. It started as an extension of the reenactor community.
Yes.
Because the reenactor community, as someone who started in the reenacting community, you have a term called Farby. And they shame people who are just getting started, or people who just want to be hanging out there with their friends in a dress that they bought off the rack, or a garment that they made that they're very happy with. And so because they're not meeting the standards that they think everyone should hit, they call them Farby. And it's very funny because all of this costume drama really started out, most of these people who came over from the reenacting community, they brought all the mess from the reenactor community and brought it into costuming. Because we would go to reenactments and people would sit around and say, oh, look at that Barb.
Mm-hmm.
We just need to stop and be happy with what we have. Please get started. Do not let anyone stop you from getting started. And if you are happy with the garment that you make, show that thing off, take a picture from every side, look in the mirror and say, oh, I look good today. Look at you, girl.
I think it's also important to be conscious of timelines here. If you are starting in month 1 of your sewing journey, please, please, please keep in mind, Abby has been doing this for 10 years. Cheyney has been doing this for 10, 15, I don't know how many years. I've been doing this for 15 years. You know, there's such a long journey that you don't see on social media. Social media is like, I mean, it's cliche, but it's the tip of the iceberg. You will never see my first videos because they don't exist. They've been deleted. That was 15 years ago. But just, you know, if you are starting in square one of your journey, not to dishearten you, you know, you do get better quickly, especially nowadays where there's so much information for free online. You will have a lot quicker of a journey than some of us did, but you are only seeing the smallest of the picture.
Also, we're so old that digital cameras and uploading to
Okay,
the
I'm
internet
gonna
was
stop you
difficult.
right here. I'm gonna stop you right here with the "we're so old" garbage. Okay, like
Have you ever had to upload cassette tapes using a FireWire?
like let's not even let's talk floppy disks. Okay, Lynn, what's the next one? We can
Yeah,
go to the next
another-
few. Quick.
Another great question here from Megan. Do you find there's a lot of pressure to make sure you've thoroughly researched video content for fear of someone coming along in the comments to correct you? Where do you draw the line to say you've done enough research on a topic, considering that research is unending? Great question.
Well, anyone who's intelligent will know that.
Yeah.
And will know that it's a non-ending game. But also, I'm very careful, and this is again how I was trained by the people that I was mentored by, but to never use definitive statements, to never be like, this is how the 19th, they wore this, but to say these were some of the things that they wore. Some women wore this. This is probably, possibly conjecture, to use these terms that, you know, if you look back on it in 15 years and all your evidence has been completely refuted, at least you didn't back yourself into a corner looking like a complete fool.
Yeah. Yes, that. I think the funny thing is like, I kind of at this point am like, when I did the video on the witch hat thing, like I started that video out of spite because someone was trying to tell Bernadette that she was appropriating witch culture on a Facebook group somewhere. And I was like, whoa, I need to actually, no, I need to unpack this. You know, like the thing is I had people like, at least you tried. And I was kind of like writing back, you're welcome to look at my citations if you don't like what I have to say, because literally every statement that came out of my mouth is backed up by an academic article. Like, I'm sorry if you don't like what I have to say, like take it up with them. I don't know what to tell you. So you do the best you can. And there's always new stuff. So
I find that I'm pretty lucky because I really do not get the same amount of scrutiny that Bernadette and Abby get, just because what I do is very, very, for lack of a better term, niche, and that there aren't a lot of people who do the very detailed research that I do. Granted, if you look at my head wrap video / lecture, I know, too long. I provide so many links to originals, examples, as well as images of the paintings that I drew. I took the head wraps from. But at the end of the day, you have to stop. I cannot provide all the information, except also on TikTok. I have a minute to tell you a little tiny bit about a topic. And people are like, you forgot this, you forgot that. No matter how much you squeeze into a video, whether it's YouTube or TikTok, you can never, let me repeat, never, do not drive yourself to the brink with trying to squeeze in all the information that you can ever come across on a topic. What you're trying to give is something that people did not know before reaching the video, or a lot of maybe hopefully a chuckle, maybe a laugh as well. That's what I hope to bring to videos. I try not to drive myself to the brink.
Cheyney, that is also excellent advice for academic journal articles, books, and everything else that we do as well. I think we all need to take that away because we all struggle with this, and the fear is real across all of it. Anna, do you want to wrap us up with one last question?
Yeah, I've got one here from Kimberly, and Kim asks, I love the storytelling and narrative aspect of all three panelists' work. Maybe we could have a larger conversation about that, i.e. what narratives are being explored and to what end. So it's just a small question.
definitely not like a dissertation level question.
Awesome storytelling.
Yeah.
I think, storytelling, I come from theater, so storytelling is really at the heart of everything I do. And ultimately, I think storytelling is at the heart of humanity. If you're not telling a story in any field, in anything that you're doing, whether you're a dress historian or you're an accountant, or whatever you're doing in life, if you can find a way to tell a compelling story and to connect with people through narrative, through something unique that people might take interest in, then you will get far in whatever you decide to do.
I use clothing as a supplement to my storytelling. I am a proud historical interpreter. It is a craft, especially being able to speak to and educate people, often, in my case, hostile crowds about the history of enslavement in this country. And it takes a lot of skill and trial and error. And I think that clothing has really helped me in further in telling that story further, and also disarming people. So I do a head wrap lecture, and a lot of times people approach it thinking it's going to be like this fun, exotic lecture about head wraps and what Black women were wearing. But in reality, you cannot talk about the history of fabrics in this country, the US, without talking about slavery, the day-to-day lives of Black women. And so it ends up being a lecture about free Black women and enslaved Black women. And halfway through, you can see their faces. They're like, oh, no, wrong lecture. And I'm like, haha, gotcha.
Amazing. Thank you. Amazing responses. They're great answers.
Absolutely. I mean, I feel so inspired, and I think that everything that I know all of us in our committee try to do is we want to tell stories too. I mean, Kate's dress diary is a story, and we all tell stories, and that is such a beautiful, I think, thing to wrap this up, because actually what we're doing is we're looking into the stories of our past, aren't we, through clothes. And that's a passion for all of us. My heart is full, you guys, not to be just so cheesy, but my heart is full. Like, I am so inspired by the three of you, and I thank you so much for spending all this time today. And I know it's been a great privilege for me to chat with you, and I know I'll chat with you again. And thank you so much. Oh God, I'm so excited. I just threw my phone on the floor. Oh, well, we still have 253 people sitting here listening to us after all this time. It's been extraordinary. Those of you who are here in the audience, thank you so much for staying. You are going to get a follow-up mail from me via Eventbrite thanking you for coming. Please don't ignore it like it's a bunch of junk, because it is going to have links to our group, how you can find out what we can do, how you can hear about our future talks, because although we don't necessarily have YouTube sensations every time, we do have all kinds of sensations. Every last Sunday of the month, we do one of these at-home talks where we have dress historians and I keep saying dress, it's textile too, please. Dress and textile historians of all varieties, makers, curators, academics, all kinds of people come and give short talks about their research joy, okay? And they're from all over. And guess what? You guys can be some of those people giving talks to us. We have a call that will be in that email. You can submit a short proposal and talk to us about what you do. And it does not have to be that you are a practicing academic with lots of degrees behind you. We want to hear about the interesting work that you do, across the spectrum of anything that this could be. This is the whole goal of this group, is to open this up. I think there might be some links we can throw in the chat, but it will come to you.
Done, Robin. Already done.
Already done, Veronica. Thank you. I did see it's been madness going in the chat and the Q&A, but it's been so fantastic. And yes, we have had people say about the chat. We are going to save the chat. We'll see about maybe doing something with it. We've not done that before, but I want to read the chat for one. I haven't had a chance. So we will do that. Watch for that email. Watch for any follow-up emails from 19th Century Dress. I promise it won't just be garbage. It will be cool, cool stuff. Thank you, Abby, Bernadette, Cheyney. You're incredible. Thank you so much to my co-hosts for being here today. Thank you to everyone. Now go off into the world, whatever time and hour. We have darkening skies here in the UK and probably people ready for dinner. And we hope to see you at the next event. Have I forgotten to say anything else? Nope. Come back. Oh, the next one. We don't know what it is, but it might focus on menswear. Because there were men in the past, apparently. And actually, we don't look at their clothes as much. So we thought we might do some menswear. So yeah, so come back. If it's not the next one, menswear, it'll probably be the following one, but that's on the list of things. We're actually trying to expand into looking at diversity, looking at disability. We want to get out and looking at non-Western stuff. By the way, please, for the love of God, if you study anything that isn't European Western stuff, please get in touch with us. I mean, in the 19th century, though. Okay, I think I'm done. Thank you, everybody, for being here.
Thank you, Robin.
Thank you.